So let's get it going, guys. Defense, or I should say quarterbacks, where they were drafted, fits, and what you like best.
I like Dwayne Haskins going to the Washington Redskins. I believe this is a great fit, not only because he's from the DMV, but he has a tremendous amount of DMV.
Well done.
They got a tremendous amount of mentors there for him. Doug Williams, obviously, is there as the general manager, can kind of talk to him about the position. But then he gets into an offense that I think kind of fits his game. This is a guy that gets to play for Jay Gruden. They throw the ball, a little West Coast offense, but they can push it down the field. Now it's just a matter of finding a few more weapons on the outside to really expand and stretch the field and allow him to really stretch his legs as a playmaker.
Bucky, I completely agree with him being your number one guy, and I think this is a really good fit. Ball placement. To me, that's one thing that we rarely talk about, where he puts the ball in certain situations on the field. If it's red zone, the ball is either at the face or the stomach, so your receiver can catch the ball and take a hit. When the guy's on the move, he's putting it where he's leading them. He's doing all the right things. And I think for the Redskins to get him at 15 is unbelievable. They thought they had to trade up to go get him, but he falls you at 15. That's great value. You may have a guy that's going to be there for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think as everybody knows, the ultimate circumstance sport. I mean, you need so much going in the right direction in order to be successful, not just coaches, but teammates. And you think about the quarterback room that he gets into, two real professionals in Case Keenum and, of course, Alex Smith. You heard what Pat Mahomes had to say about being able to learn under Alex Smith, how much more prepared it made him. So probably best case is for Dwayne to sit around and just absorb it all and make his way maybe halfway through, depending on how the season's going, or even a full season later.
You know, I think when you look at Dwayne Haskins, you do have to get help around him. There's no question about that. But I saw signs of him becoming a full-field reader, which is a little unusual at Ohio State. But that's because we know his background is such that he's been promoted and pushed towards this direction. And not enough guys get to sit. Not enough guys get to redshirt in college. Right. Not enough guys get to redshirt in the pros. That is such a great opportunity when you get that opportunity. And Aaron Rodgers made the most of it. There's been a lot of players who make the most of it when they get their chances. And I think that's just such an important step for him in Washington.
Can I say this, too? Ohio State, remember, they tailor their offense to the players they have. Right? So all those other quarterbacks that they've had, they weren't full-field guys. They were half-field readers, quick hitters. I mean, when they had Ezekiel Elliott, they were a downhill power run team. You get a quarterback that can make every throw and do all the reads. Then you tailor your offense. Yeah, 50 touchdowns. Right.
Leads the FBS. Lance, you know the Arizona Cardinal organization, data coach there for a long time. What do you make of their decision to take Kyler Murray? Do you get it?
Oh, yeah, I totally get it. I mean, as soon as Cliff Kingsbury was hired, to me, you might as well have made the pick right then. You could have run the card in right then because Cliff Kingsbury loved this kid. He said that he'd draft him number one. All the signs were out there. He's been in love with him since he was in high school. He's had a tremendous. He's been a winner now, except at Texas A&M, and he really struggled there at Texas A&M, and that's why we didn't see this coming. That's why the baseball thing made total sense at the time because no one expected Kyler Murray to do this. No one expected a 5'10"-ish quarterback to ever be the first pick of the draft. But Arizona right now. That is an organization in flux. I didn't think Josh Rosen had any chance there with the way it was set up. It just wasn't his fault. But Kyler, the one thing Kyler can do is he can create time for himself in the pocket. And he's going to need to because they still need O-line help.
They do need O-line help, but I like this pick too because I think it's the perfect marriage between play caller and playmaker, meaning Cliff Kingsbury gets to design an offense around the ultimate playmaker at the position and Kyler Murray. So when you think about what you want to do as a franchise, you want the coach and the quarterback to be joined at the hip. Well, this is what takes place when you have a guy who is arguably one of the best air raid quarterbacks that we've seen join a masterful playmaker, play designer from the air raid.
Well, I would say that we have to give the Cardinals credit because I felt like they were going to take Murray regardless. And so if I'm going to take him, why not get a coach that I think can make this guy better, right? So many times it's always the coach, then the player. They knew going in that they were going to try to get this guy, so we got to get the best coach for him. And remember, we were all like, why Kingsbury? Like, what is going on? Well, this probably was the plan the whole time, is getting a guy who can run that air raid system with Kyler Murray and help him be able to make some plays. You already have Christian Kirk, who's, again, a spread core receiver. So you're starting to put pieces around.
But they drafted Andy Isabella, too, which I think is interesting because in air raid, you want two guys that can boogie from the slot. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what they got now.
Think about Wes Welker and what he was able to do. But by the way, can I guess just to play the opposite side and contrarian here?
Yeah.
Won 7 games. What did you hear about Pat Mahomes coming out of A&M? All right, throws off platform, doesn't have, I'm sorry, out of Texas Tech. that doesn't have good mechanics. And okay, well, wait a minute. But I thought Kingsbury was his coach, and yet this is a guy who came in and he was totally raw and needed so much work and all that.
Well, I'll say this: he probably talking to the Chiefs, he did need a lot of work to run their system, right? To do what they want to do. But to run the air raid, be able to throw off, that's what they want you to do. They want you to get off platforms sometimes, make some of those crazy throws. And I remember watching tape. He has the arm for to make some of those Mahomes throws and the ability to throw late down the field if you have someone to go get it.
Remember who Cliff also coached, and this doesn't get talked about, and this is kind of a bad word now, a bad name. He coached Johnny Manziel.
Sure.
Yep.
Johnny was a hell of a college quarterback.
Yep.
And maybe could have been. And really, people like to push Johnny aside, but Kyler's got some notes on the finish of the Pinot.
Right.
He's got notes of Johnny Manziel, and that's okay when you're talking about the positivity of it in the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I like it, but like, part of the reason Kyler Murray can be number one is because it's the perfect storm. Baker Mayfield playing well, coming on the air raid, being able to have success in the league. Russell Wilson is now the highest paid quarterback in the National Football League, an undersized guy. And then you have seen the Pat Mahomes effect. When you have Pat Mahomes come from the air raid and do things that we hadn't seen done at the quarterback position before, it allows you to let your imagination run wild. And I think that's what the Arizona Cardinals were able to do when they took.
Let's get to a more, I guess, traditional-looking quarterback, and Drew Lock.
Yeah.
Big arm, big guy. So many people had him attached to the Broncos, Lance, at number 10. They trade back, then they attach him at number 20. They get Noah Fant, and they end up getting him in the second round.
See, I love this because here's another red shirt scenario for Drew Lock. And this is one where Drew can really get his mind right. When you really take a look at Drew Lock, more than all of the big four quarterbacks, he checks more boxes. From a mechanics standpoint, he's got some pretty good mechanics, even though they go askew with some of his, the way he will just kind of airmail some throws. He's got the arm, he's got the size, he's got the mobility, he's got production in the SEC, he's got consistency. He's done it for a long time. So why is he the fourth quarterback and dropping? I think it's inconsistency in the big games. And when I watched him against Alabama and Georgia, the confidence kind of turned off a little bit for him. And I think being able to sit behind Joe Flacco and learn how to play chess as opposed to be reactive and really maybe I think pre-snap, win the battle pre-snap and then post-snap behind a professional like Joe Flacco, I think that's a big advantage.
I'll say this. The one thing when you're redshirting, you have to make sure you understand you have to get better. This isn't a time, sometimes guys redshirt and then they kind of just rest on their laurels a little bit. Hey, when I get in there, I'll do my thing. You have to learn from Joe Flacco what he does really well, what he doesn't do well. You have to learn from those things. And then when you get your opportunities in practice, you have to make those throws. And you have to understand that your arm talent isn't always going to be it. And that's the problem you get when you get these strong arm quarterbacks that we saw with, obviously, Josh Allen. We saw with Sam Darnold with the Jets. If you trust your arm too much, it becomes a turnover fest. You have to be able to kind of reel that in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to say this, and then we're going to talk about Daniel Jones in a minute, but there's kind of been the rush to kind of sympathize with Daniel Jones and what he didn't have around him. Well, just know, Drew Lock didn't have a lot around him either. And in terms of drop passes, Missouri was near the top of the list when it came to the number of drop passes. So the completion percentage is a little deceiving. He's a guy who can't throw the ball consistently in the strike zone. Does he have to improve? Absolutely. But if I'm taking a guy and to take him outside of the first round, I want someone who physically checks off all the boxes. He does that. Big arm, athletic. Talking about the leadership ability, the experience, he is exactly what you want. And to get him out the first round, there's no pressure to rush him onto the field.
And I know I'm going to upset you when I say this, Buck, but I'm going to say it anyway. People forget, Missouri is no longer in the Big 12. They're in the SEC. So Drew Lock is doing that against the SEC. Not saying the ACC isn't a talented conference. It is, but you have a lot more at the bottom end that you
North
can
Carolina
feast on.
is like a rivalry game.
And even, you mentioned, Daniel Jones gets to go against those defenses. Drew Lock had to go against the SEC.
He did,
his career with lesser talent.
Absolutely, and he didn't play well. He was going to the gunfight with a butter knife.
Exactly.
But it didn't always work out.
And to Bucky's point, actually that horrible game against Georgia that I mentioned, he didn't have Emmanuel Hall, his top wide receiver, either. And so that kind of plays into, that problem.
But I want to say this before we go. Let's always remember this. When you talk about the great quarterbacks that are in the NFL, a lot of them didn't play with guys. They had to do more with less.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm able to project you going forward. did you do more with less? If you have all these weapons around you you're throwing, then I'm going to knock you down because it's those guys around you that are helping
That's
you
a
out.
great quarterback when you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
And that
quarterback.
was the Matt Leinart effect. Like, well, do we know what he is?
Right.
Because look what's around him.
He had everybody.
And you know,
Everybody.
Money, I think
25
that's what I
guys
like
got drafted off that team.
about Daniel Jones is
Let's
that
go to Daniel Jones.
that's one of the things that I think he doesn't get credit for is that he really didn't have a whole lot around him. Let's be honest about that. He really didn't. Now, he's my fourth quarterback. I watched him on tape, and there's things that I don't love as much. But one thing that I can't knock him for is that he was out there competing and getting better with lesser opponents in that conference. I mean, with lesser pieces in that conference. With that said, I want to see a higher level of football at some point on tape. I did not see the flashes, and I know there are guys who get excited about his anticipation. To say, where's the takeover? Where's the takeover in a game?
I think so. That's me again. I think he's in the same boat as Drew Lock. As you sit behind Eli Manning, you better get better because there's gonna come a point in time where you're gonna have to play, especially being drafted at number 6. You're gonna have to play, and you're not in Denver, right? You're not in a smaller market. You're in one of the biggest markets in the world, and so you're going to have a ton of pressure on you.
A team that passed on Sam Darnold, a team that passed on trading for Josh Rosen, a team that passed on Dwayne Haskins. I mean, there's a lot going there. Just quickly, Buck, you were at the Senior Bowl. You heard what Dave Gettleman said. He said, I went to the Senior Bowl and I saw a professional football player. Now, I know he's the MVP of the game, but we know the game is the least important thing of Senior Bowl week. What did you see from Daniel Jones when he was stacked up against other guys at the Senior Bowl?
I saw a guy who is smart as a whip. I saw a guy who is athletic. But I also saw a guy who struggled when the lights were bright. He struggled taking the hard coaching from John Gruden. He kind of crumbled a little bit in practice. But to his credit, when the game came, he was the MVP. Played well, threw the ball well, made plays with his legs, and he showed that he has some flashes being a starting quarterback. Did I envision the Daniel Jones that I saw at the Senior Bowl being the 6th player in the draft? Absolutely not. And I don't believe he's the 6th best player in this draft. However, the Giants believe that he can be a franchise quarterback, so we're going to go with him. But you are right. He is always going to be measured not only against the quarterbacks in this class, but against the Sam Darnolds and Josh Rosens and the guys the Giants could have selected as a franchise quarterback.
And remember, for the Giants, it goes back a year. Would you rather have Sam Darnold, and even if you give him Josh Jacobs at 6 or 17, I mean, would you rather have that, or would you rather have Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley? I mean, it's just.
I like Saquon Barkley.
Who doesn't? But again,
obviously,
you got to take the combo, right? You now have Daniel Jones as your quarterback because you took Saquon